Welcome. So you've got data, probably tons of it, but how do you turn all those messy numbers into something a manager can actually use? Today we're going to talk all about descriptive analytics, how looking at what's already happened can give you this incredibly clear advantage for what to do next. Let's get right into it.
Pretty much every business today is just swimming in data. We've got sales figures, website clicks, customer comments, you name it. But here's the thing, having all that data and actually understanding it, they're two totally different worlds. It's that classic problem of being data rich, but insight poor. So the big question is, how do we start fixing that?
All right, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the absolute basics. Then we'll get into how you can measure what really truly matters for your business. After that, we're going to dive into the science of testing your big ideas, look at a few common tools, and wrap it all up with some amazing real-world examples.
Okay, let's start with section 1, what happened? Before you can even think about predicting what's going to happen, you have to have a rock-solid grasp on the past. So what exactly is this thing we call descriptive analytics?
Well, at its core, descriptive analytics is all about answering one simple, powerful question. What happened? It's the art of taking all that old data, all those past events and numbers, and making sense of it. Think of it like creating the highlight reel for your business.
And if you take one thing away from this part, let it be this. You simply can't predict the future or make smart decisions without first understanding the past. Descriptive analytics is that foundation. It's the bedrock. Without it, everything else you try to build on top is just going to crumble.
Okay, so now we know what it is. Let's move on to section 2 and figure out how we do it. To understand what happened, you've got to be measuring the right stuff. Because, let's be honest, not all data is created equal. And that's where key metrics and KPIs come into play.
So what's the difference? Let's use an analogy. Think of your business as a car. Your metrics are like the speedometer. They tell you what's happening right now, like your speed or your RPMs. But your KPIs, your key performance indicators, they're like your GPS. They're telling you if you're actually on the right road to get to your destination. You need both, for sure. But it's the KPIs that tell you if you're truly on track to win.
All right, we know what to measure, but how do we use that data to actually test our ideas? This is where things get a little more scientific and honestly a lot more powerful. Let's talk about hypothesis testing.
So every good experiment needs a starting point, right? That's what we call the null hypothesis. You can think of it as the status quo, or the boring default assumption. It basically says that your new idea, whatever it is, has no effect. For instance, a null hypothesis might be, changing the color of this button won't make any difference to the number of clicks.
And then you've got your new, exciting idea. That's the alternative hypothesis. This is the claim you're hoping your data will actually prove. So in our button example, the alternative would be, hey, changing this button color will increase clicks. This is the whole reason you're running the test in the first place.
And this whole thing follows a really clear 4-step process that basically gets rid of all the guesswork. First, you state your two competing ideas, the status quo and your new claim. Second, you decide how much proof you'll need to be convinced. Third, you go out, get your data, and run the numbers. And fourth, you make the call. Is there enough evidence to throw out the old idea and go with the new one? It's a structured way to make decisions.
So that's the theory behind it. But what are the actual tools you'd use? In this next section, let's just quickly go over 3 of the most common tests you're likely to see out in the wild.
First up, you've got the classic 2-sample t-test. This is basically your A-B test. Is ad A performing better than ad B? Are customers in one city spending more than customers in another? This is the test that tells you if the difference you're seeing is actually meaningful, or if it could just be random luck.
Okay, but what if you're not dealing with numbers, but with categories, like happy versus unhappy customers? That's where the chi-square test comes in. It's perfect for finding out if there's a real connection between 2 different categories. Like, does the store someone shops at actually have an impact on how satisfied they are?
So how does this magic work?
Well, it's actually pretty clever. The test calculates what your results should look like if there was absolutely no relationship at all. Then, it compares that imaginary expected result with what you actually saw in your data. The bigger the difference between what was expected and what really happened, the more likely it is that you found a real, meaningful link. And finally, what if you want to compare more than just 2 things? Maybe you want to see how 3 different marketing campaigns performed. Instead of running a bunch of separate A/B tests, you can just use ANOVA. It lets you compare all 3 groups at the same time to see if any of them stand out. Honestly, it's a huge time saver. Phew! Enough with the theory. To wrap all this up, let's see how this stuff actually works in the real world.
I've got 3 fantastic examples of descriptive analytics in action.
I mean, come on, that sounds completely made up, right? Like something you'd read at the checkout counter. But this is actually one of the most famous and frankly brilliant examples of simple descriptive analytics out there.
So here's the story. Walmart was just looking at its historical sales data. That's it, pure descriptive analytics, and they noticed something really weird. Just before a big hurricane was about to hit, sales of strawberry Pop-Tarts would go through the roof. They just listened to what their own past data was screaming at them. Now, when a storm's on the way, they make sure to stock up on Pop-Tarts. A simple observation that led to a wildly successful strategy.
Next up, let's look at manufacturing. Toyota's world-famous quality is literally built on hypothesis testing. On the assembly line, their default assumption, their null hypothesis, is this part is perfect, and they are constantly running tests on that. The second their data shows a part is even a tiny bit off, they have proved to reject the null and yank that part from the line. It's all about catching tiny problems before they become big, expensive ones.
And for our last one, think about PayPal. How do they spot a fraudulent transaction so fast? It all starts by describing what's normal for you. They analyze your entire transaction history to build a baseline of your typical behavior. The instant a transaction pops up that doesn't fit that pattern, like a huge purchase in a country you've never been to, it gets flagged. It's descriptive analytics acting like your own personal digital bodyguard.
So what's the big picture here? Your historical data isn't just a boring old record of the past. It's a storybook, and it's filled with clues about your customers, your business, and your best opportunities. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Your data is telling a story. Are you listening?